This video is about my 2 recommendations for Ender3 upgrade. But before all that, let me introduce you to my current setup. Well, first let's have the printer switched on. You know what? It's a bit dark. Let there be light. Ta-da! Say hello to Dorothy. Hi Dorothy. My first recommendation is BLTouch. Is this red item you're seeing on the screen right now. So what it does? Well, for a good print, your printer bed should be leveled, which means the vertical distance from the nozzle to any point of the bed should be the same distance. The bed itself on an Ender sits on 4 springs in a fulcrum way, where changing position of the lower left of your bed would change position of the top right and vice versa. Similarly, changing the bottom right would change the top left. To get the bed leveling is a hard laborious process without any additional tool. BLTouch helps us in 2 different ways. It probes the bed at multiple positions and stores value of the distance to bed in memory. These values makes leveling the bed super easy, barely an inconvenience. We'll look more into that later. Finally, with this stored value, printer can make further adjustments to the print, taking the current level into account. I do have a video about how to update Ender firmware with BLTouch support. There are several speed optimizations which makes the BLTouch probes reasonably fast. Finally, you either do a probe before an actual print or load an existing saved mesh with a G-code value. Finally, I bought my BLTouch from Amazon. Currently it's going for $56.99 GBP. There are also some non-branded BLTouch which are much cheaper at $28.50. My second recommendation is a Raspberry Pi 3 or better. With a Pi installed with Octoprint on your network and connected to your printer over USB, opens up a bunch of new possibilities. At the beginning of this video, you saw me switching on my printer and enclosure light remotely. That is entirely done using Raspberry Pi. It also allows me to send print remotely without walking up to it and using the SD card. I can also monitor my current print with a small Pi camera, which also lets me take nice time-lapse print videos. On top of that, I have current temperature and humidity values inside my enclosure, which is helpful when printing materials like ABS. One thing I didn't get around yet is a filament sensor, which is really a tiny micro switch connected to the Pi to notify when the filament runs out. And there is a lot more. Once the Pi is running on the network with Octoprint, you will have an IP address to connect to. In my case, I have an internal DNS setup, so I will just use an URL. Once connected, you have to authorize yourself. On screen, you can see my initial GUI. On top navbar, I have options to switch on my printer, my enclosure lights with various other reports. Let's switch on my printer first, and then we'll use the connection tab to connect. Once connected, my first tab shows me my current nozzle and bed temperature. Second tab is hooked to my Pi camera. This is great to monitor a print or for time-lapse video. The third tab allows me to define exclusion zones from printing. Apart from trying to recover from a bad print, this also lets me print partial modules. Then a terminal window. I can use this to issue G-code commands. Next tab is the fun one. it's bed visualizer for BLTouch. When I click Update Mesh, BLTouch starts probing the bed. And to my settings, after it have probed 9 points, at the end of the process, I get a 3D visualization of my bed. After the probing is done, I note a dot 0.78 at my bottom left, that's the x0, y0. At my bottom right, I see a 0.97. At my top left, I see a 0.65. And at my top right, it's 0.55, where the middle being minus 0.005. So on my current setup, my highest position is my bottom right, which is 0.097, and the lowest point is my middle, which is minus 0.005. So overall, the difference between my highest and my lowest is really quite small. It's almost 0.12. So I guess that's quite acceptable. If we look at the terminal window, we would see the probing value at this point. If we want to retain this value, we need to issue a M500 G-code command to save it, followed by settings for Octolapse. This is the one that allows us to create time-lapse videos. Octoprint supports a bunch of plugins. Let's see what I have installed. You have already seen Bed Visualizer in action. Next, better hit a timeout. This is for those moments when you forgot about your print. In my case, I have set it to 5 minutes. Cost estimation gives you an estimate on how much a print would cost, taking electricity, wear and tear, and filament into account. Enclosure plugin is what I use to switch on off my enclosure lights and to get a reading from my DHT, that's digital humidity temperature sensor. You have already seen Exclude Region in action. Next, Filament Manager. This can keep track of all your filament spools and give you an approximate estimation on how much is left in your spool. I'm using PSU control as it gives me a little bit more control than Enclosure plugin. Finally, Temperature Failsafe shuts down my printer if my bed or nozzle reports above specified degrees. This is a nice safety feature. Wrapping up with some final thoughts. I'm using a small external power supply for my Pi, which in turn drives 2 relays that supply 220 volt to Ender3 power supply and 12 volt to my enclosure light. Now, some tutorials suggest pulling the power supply from the Ender PSU itself. But considering the amount of power my Pi would pull with all the connected relays, sensor and lights, I felt it would be safer to have a separate power supply. It also saves my printer on the long term, as the PSU for the printer is only getting turned on demand. You might also have noticed my laser printer under Ender3. Well, my Lexmark laser printer is not Wi-Fi enabled. As I have the Pi sitting there anyway, I decided to use it also to have my laser printer change into a network laser printer, which means just like my Ender3, I can use any other computer within my network to print to the laser printer. Well, I hope this has been beneficial to you. All the very best.